Hi, thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Reynolds, and I'm the Director of the Office of Downtown Development here at the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. And today we're going to be focusing on work plan essentials. In 2017, our office has decided to make it a priority to focus on work plan development for the rest of this year. We know how important a good work plan can be in, adding to the success of a community. We've always heard from managers, what do I do when someone comes up to me and wants to add more to our plate? How do we say no? How do we deal with that? How do we mitigate some of that? Well, our response always goes, what's in your, goes back to what's in your work plan. If having a good work plan that's well thought out, that has community involvement, buy-in from your elected officials, from your municipal government, from your board members itself, it's really going to help shape what you do as a program and also what you don't do as a program. And really help give you guidance and support in those situations when someone comes up and says, hey, let's add this to your plate. It gives you a good jumping off point to say, hey, thank you, let's see if this really makes sense for us, but also here's what we've already committed to working on this year. So with that being said, we have 100+ programs that we work with on a daily basis across the state, and everybody does work plans a little bit differently. So whenever we're going through the assessment process, we're constantly having to learn how a community has put their work plan together every time we go to assess them. So it's a little bit different. Everybody, puts things together in a different way. And so in order to kind of streamline that process, to help create some more continuity, to help make it easier on our office to understand your goals and your initiatives, and also to give you guys a little bit more direction and purpose, we've created a work plan template that we're going to review today, and that we're going to show you what it's designed to do, what it's intended for, and with the hope that this will help create some unity and some focus with our programs. But before that, we've got a little bit of perspective we're going to give you about the importance of work planning and also some first steps before you actually dive into creating the work plan. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Tommy Lohman. He is our Communications and Training Coordinator here at the Office of Downtown Development. And Tommy, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, first thing we're going to focus on is the national perspective. The first thing they want is to identify the community vision for success. Now, if you look on the National Main Street website, you're going to see that the approach begins with creating a vision for success on Main Street. And the way they like to do this is to focus on the work plan. And ways that they've come up with to do this in a better fashion to incorporate all 4 points are these community transformation strategies. So as we look at the definition here, they say that a vision of success alone is not enough. Communities must work together to identify key strategies known as community transformation strategies that will provide a clear sense of priorities and direction for revitalization efforts. So basically, they want you to say, what is the most important thing for my community, and how are we going to transform, or how are we going to get there? So who do we want to be and how do we want to get there? It says also that typically communities will find 2 or 3 community transformation strategies that are needed to help reach a community vision. So when we think about a vision, we think really big picture, and what we don't want to do is get lost in that cloud of the vision or whatever. So what we do is we try to think of 3 really good ways, 3 action items each year that can help us reach the goal. So if we're looking at creating a more, a busier city center, we want to bring people downtown, we look at ways to do that. So we create 3 goals or 3 transformation strategies that'll get us there. And Jessica's going to go into more detail on the community transformation strategy in just a minute. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and jump into why do we plan and some of the reasons behind it. So a few words on planning. Now, if your plan doesn't work, change the plan, not the goal. So let's look at this next slide right here. This is what happens to a lot of communities. They have a goal in mind, and they think this is the way we're going to get there, but when things happen, and they do, especially in local community government, things can get tabled until they are no longer applicable. You can have a turnover in leadership. You can have newly elected officials come on board, and now you have to educate them in the process. You have staff turnover. You can have organizations that were, working with you to reach the goal, and now they're not part of the goal anymore. So things change, but what you don't want to do is change the goal. You want to continue to keep the same goal. You just work on the plan. You change your plan a little bit, because I've seen it time and time again. I know, Jessica, we've seen where communities will start working on a plan, and it's a great goal they're trying to achieve, but they see some hiccups and then just table it, and that plan sits on the shelf for so long that it gets covered with dust, and then nothing ever happens. Mm-hmm. So if you do a couple of these, then you haven't actually accomplished anything in the year. But if you get some realistic goals that you can accomplish in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, you have something to work toward. And when things start happening that you didn't expect, you just change the plan. You don't change the goal.
Well, and I think that also goes back to we talk about a work plan being a living document, that it's never set in stone. It doesn't have to be set in stone, and that it should change and evolve as the plan changes and evolves. And that kind of references this, as landmines come up, as hiccups come up, we don't just throw away what we're working towards. We just change how we're going to get there.
Right. And so if you look on the next slide here, you'll see that the goal in this picture stays the same. Just click on it. Yeah. So the goal stays the same. You don't want to keep changing your goal. Just change the plan around a little bit. See what you can do different to accomplish the goal you set out. Because if you do the first things that you need to do first, which is gather all your information, you will formulate goals that apply to the entire community, and they're good goals. So this is some very good sound advice, or a very good definition that I thought about planning here. Mark Twain came up with this. It was really good. It says the secret to getting ahead is getting started. The secret of getting started is breaking your complex, overwhelming task into manageable tasks, and then starting on the first one. Sometimes the vision is just extremely large and can be overwhelming. So if we can start there and then break it down into more manageable tasks, we can actually get things done, and that will lead us to the goal.
So before we get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role that the planning plays into creating your work plan, and what those steps need to look like. But first and foremost, I want to remind everyone that we are economic developers. We are economic development in the context of historic preservation. A lot of times we get the rap as party planners, but I'm going to keep saying this over and over and over until it finally sticks. But Main Street is economic development. We are economic developers. We are creating jobs. We are creating a financial impact, both private and public. We are bringing people downtown, and not just for events and festivals, but to create a vibrant community, to create a sense of place. People are moving downtown, and we've got the numbers to prove that. And so when we think about work plan development, we need to make sure that we're thinking beyond just the events and bringing people together, but what are we doing to support the businesses that we have? What are we doing to help create new jobs? And what are we doing to help contribute to our greater community? So there's some important components of your work plan that you will notice that we have outlined in this work plan template that we're going to show you a little bit later. But before we dive into that, we've got transformation strategies, we've got your goal, we've got timelines, budget, responsible parties, status, that's where are you at in this project, the partners you're going to be playing with and working with, and then the synopsis. A lot of people have some of these components in a work plan. Very few have all of them. And the reason that all of these are important is because they all really play into each other. We can have our big transformation strategies and our goals that we're working for, but if we don't have a timeline as far as how are we going to execute this, if we don't have an identified revenue stream in our budgets, if we don't have responsible parties that have been, identified and named to work with us and partners, these are just those little pieces of the puzzle that get dropped, and that's how things go awry, and that's how you end up at the end of the year saying, well, we had this really great idea, whatever happened to it? Well, when these things aren't identified in the beginning, that leaves opportunity for us to kind of forget some of them.
Well, and over the past decade, Jessica and I have looked at communities. The ones that are really successful are the ones that plan to execute and then execute the plan.
Absolutely. Yep. So, these are all some things that we're going to talk about today, and you'll see them in the actual work plan template later. Of course, Main Street is dope. This is one of our favorite slides to show, and we're not just talking about the slang D.O.P.E, but we're talking about the 4-point approach. So when we talk about the 4 points, a great way to remember it is to say D.O.P.E, but it focuses on design, organization, promotion, and economic development. And in our world, in Main Street, we believe that when these 4 points come together in a balanced approach, that we get good economic development, good downtown development. And that balanced approach is really important because, I can tell you we can easily look at a community's work plan and tell if they're a 1-point program versus a 4-point program because, we're just going to see emphasis in one certain area. So with this work plan template and focusing on these community transformation strategies, the fundamentals really will remain the same. We want to make sure that we're being comprehensive and broad-based in our approach. We need to make sure that there's a diversified funding stream. We can't put all our eggs in one basket and rely on one funding stream solely, because what happens when that funding stream gets cut off? So does that project. So we have to think about how do we diversify our revenue, how do we diversify our income. We want to make sure that there's buy-in, that we have a unified vision for the future and for our community. And of course, first and foremost, everything that we do is solely volunteer driven, which means that we have to get the support of those in our community and those partners in our community. But what is going to be changing is that we're going to be focusing less on how we're doing something and more on why we're doing it. I think in the past, we had done work plans just because we felt like we needed to do them. It was something that was required, but it wasn't a tool that people were actually utilizing. Now, the good communities that were really excelling and succeeding were using their work plan, and it wasn't something, like Tommy said, that was just sitting on the shelf gathering dust. It was something that was, a viable living document that, they were going back to over and over and over again to see how, they were measuring their own success. But I think, sometimes we get so focused on, how we're doing something, we don't always take a step back and say, why are we doing it? And that's really important for us to consider. So with the Main Street approach, we want to focus on 3 different things. The first is understanding the conditions on the ground, or what we'll call the inputs. The second is the transformation strategies itself, and the third is the impact and measurements, or what we call the outputs. So when we talk about understanding the conditions on the ground, this is really focusing on getting community buy-in. Maybe that is through focus groups, town hall meetings, online surveys, paper surveys, social media feedback. The idea is just like we wouldn't advertise for an event in one place one time only, the same way about getting information and feedback from the community. We need to diversify how we're reaching out to them. Not everybody communicates the same way, not everybody interacts the same way, so we need to make sure that we're engaging with people in multiple ways and multiple dimensions on multiple levels so that we can get feedback that is actually helpful and a good resource for us. And that is going to go and play into creating a great work plan. When we talk about understanding conditions on the ground, it's great to think big idea and big picture, but we also have to know what we're working with and, what are going to be the challenges. What is the population of our community? What's the average age, average household income, estimated home value? What's the gender and race makeup of our communities? All these things are going to play into your success, and really, it's not going to make or break it, but having this information and being well informed about what you're working with just helps you make more educated decisions. If we are in a community that has a huge millennial population that has multiple schools that are surrounding the downtown, well then maybe we want to cater to young entrepreneurs, and how do we get them to stay around after they graduate? How do we get them to invest in this community versus focusing something on baby boomers or Generation X? So it's about making informed decisions. So we can get this information for several different places. I think Tommy and I would both agree the first place I would go personally is, power companies.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to pulling this information, those guys do it on a regular basis, and so whether it's EMC or Georgia Power or any of your regional commissions as well, they will pull this information for you. Most of the time it's free. And it's great to use, and a lot of times they'll sit down and help you interpret the data. So absolutely.
And you can also check out citydata.com. They've got some general stuff on there. Sometimes Googling can get you a lot of information, but it's important to know what you're working with. Understanding your business climate is going to be the next important component. You know, I was at a meeting last night and we were talking about revitalizing the district and talking about incentives. You know, how do we incentivize this? What can we offer? You know, and talking about a beautification grant. You know, same kind of concept as a facade grant, but maybe a little bit more expansive. And the organization was trying to put a number on it. You know, what should we cap this at? How much should we give for each one? You know, and the question came up of, well, how many businesses are within the district? So, like, let's say we say $50,000 and the max is 10. Well, that's 5. Well, is that a fourth of what the businesses are? Is that a third? Is that half? You know, what is that representation? So it's really important to know what you have to work with before you get started. And that's where having a really good building and property inventory comes into play. Understanding that average cost per square foot and understanding those consumer spending habits. You know, Cherokee County is really important when, you know, we talk about consumer spending habits. When they look at the commuter metrics for Cherokee County, 80% of their daytime population, you know, leaves to go and work in Atlanta. So if you have a business that's open, you know, 9 to 5 or 10 to 5, 80% of the people that live in your community aren't there during those hours. And let's face it, with Atlanta traffic, they're not getting home till, you know, 6, 6:30, 7, the best. I do that commute, you know, I totally get it. But, you know, when we go to business owners and want to help them make informed decisions and talk about hours, it helps to go to them with actual real data and information versus just saying, hey, you guys really need to be open later. But if you can go to them and say, hey, did you know that out of a population of this much, these many people are gone, you know, during the time that you're open? No wonder we have such a small market. We need to help, you know, increase that. How do we change that? By changing our hours and reaching out to people. So, you know, it's not about just making an argument for something, it's about making an informed, educated argument. Talking about cutting through the red tape, you know, before you get started, you know, you need to understand what you have to work with as a city. You know, a lot of board members also have businesses, so this is where they can be a great resource to the Main Street manager and the board itself, understanding that business license and, you know, alcohol fees, signage fees, any kind of processing fees that would be involved with the city, understanding, you know, who you have to go to, what it takes, how long that process is, who at the city oversees it, understanding code enforcement, zoning requirements, understanding what your existing infrastructure is and what you have to work with. All these things are going to, you know, play into your downtown businesses and their success. You know, so, you know, when we're thinking about, oh, we want to create a really good business recruitment tool, or we want to create a business recruitment packet or something like that, having this information and knowing where to start, that's going to be really important. So once we've kind of done our groundwork, we know what we're working with, we know who our partners are, we understand the conditions on the ground, we really want to focus on what's next, which is our strategies. And when we talk about transformation strategies, Tommy hit on it earlier, we're talking big picture. And I'm speaking from personal experience here, but I think, Tommy, you've seen the same thing. When I was a local manager, you know, when I first started and we were talking about work plan development, we were very focused on creating something in the 4-point approach, but instead of looking at it, what's best for the downtown and what's best big picture, we started looking at it, okay, what are we going to do this year in design? And what are we going to do this year in economic development? What are we going to do this year in promotions? And then you get to organization, and nobody really understands what that means, you know, and how you do something in organization. You know, so instead of looking at it from that approach in this siloed effect, let's look at it from the approach of what is going to be the best for the community that we're in, what is going to be best for the downtown in general, and focusing on a strategy to achieve that. So with these transformation strategies, you know, it's really going to guide the direction of this revitalization initiatives. It's going to be implemented through all the 4 points, and you'll see that in the next slide. It's going to bring about substantive transformation and change. It needs to be reflective of the broader community based on that understanding of the district's economic performance and opportunities. That's what we're talking about with understanding the conditions on the ground. You know, typically these are focusing on a consumer or market-based. Measurable, needs to be measurable. How do we know if we're being successful? Because we can set measurable goals and objectives. And the idea is that, you know, these would change and evolve over time, maybe 2 to 5 years. In the past, we focused so much on that 12-month period, but the reality is that a lot of times it takes longer than 12 months to accomplish something that's substantive and that's going to be a dramatic change in our community or going to make a dramatic impact. And so our office is less concerned about the time frame and just more that you have an active plan that you are working towards.
Well, a good example of that too is we went to Rome, not too far back, but we went to Rome to work on helping them develop a plan for the riverfront district and tie it into the downtown district that's already very successful. And so what we come away with there is that all the different points touch on what they're trying to do. So we met with all of them, and out of that, the strategy is to transform that district into something that's producing and viable and connected. And so in order to do that, every single committee is going to have to be doing something to get that done. So it crosses more than just, and it's not just in one point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's interesting seeing how, something that you do can really touch design, economic development, promotions, all of them, So with that, in mind, let's get them to get ownership over it versus us trying to, kind of make it fit in this one particular way, which I think was, a unique way of approaching it. So this is just a visual highlighting the transformation strategies and how they cross over all the 4 points. I think when we are thinking big picture, when we're thinking comprehensive, when we're thinking about what's best for the businesses in the downtown, that we see that, all these different components really do come into play and come in to support it, and that one is not mutually exclusive of the other. Like I said before, there's 2 types of strategies that the National Main Street Center likes to focus on. The first is catalyst strategies, and then the second is customized strategies. When we talk about catalyst strategies, we're really focusing on either a consumer group or a concentration of a type of product, business, or service. And so when I say a consumer group, we're talking about your customers. So the people that you're serving in your community, whether that's college students, tourists, maybe you're near a military installation, maybe you have a lot of millennials, downtown workers or residents, elderly, but this also goes back to you have to understand what you have, So before we can focus on a consumer group, we have to know what consumers we have in our community. And maybe that's identifying a gap that we're trying to tap into, or maybe it's saying, hey, this is our target market, and so let's really maximize this. And the reason all these things are important is because we're not going to market to millennials the same way we're going to market to baby boomers. If I want to cater to millennials, I probably don't need to run an ad in the paper. They probably don't even know we have a paper locally, So we have to be creative about how we're reaching out to people and engaging with them, and understanding that consumer and those customers is really going to help us make informed decisions. Examples of customer or product-based strategies means we would focus on an actual product or a product or service or something like that. Maybe you live in a more rural community, so you're very agricultural driven. Maybe you want to have an arts and entertainment district. You've got a thriving downtown at night, and you want to create, an entertainment nightlife. There's a lot of communities that have really become these niches for antiques.
Well, I can give you an example on that. See, when I started in Main Street years ago in Blackshear, it was the green movement, so everyone was opening consignment shops at a rapid pace. Very easy to get into. Everybody was doing it. So all of a sudden we had, 10 or 15 consignment shops in or around our downtown area. So what we wanted to do was bring in some higher-end clientele, so we had to start working with our shops to transfer into French Market style stores that carried antiques, and now they're an antique destination. People can come shop all day there for antiques in different stores. It took some time, but it was a product-based strategy that got us there. We knew what we had, we knew what we wanted, where we wanted to go with it, and it was just working with the business owners and changing the dynamics a little bit.
And you really carved out a niche for yourself, which creates tourism and makes it a destination. The idea with those custom-based strategies, I don't really talk about it here, but really what we're saying is that we're focusing on the needs of the community. What is happening particular in your community? What are the challenges? What do you have to work with? And really saying, okay, this is what's happening in my community, and this is how we're planning to address it. It just means we're not looking at necessarily a consumer or a product. We're looking at the community itself. So with this new approach, focusing on these transformation strategies versus just the individual 4 points, this is what we hope to get from this: an increased focus on economic development. We said that in the beginning, that we are economic developers. I feel like promotions tends to be our sweet spot, our comfort zone for some people, you know, and you find what you're good at and you just keep doing it. But we need to remember that, you know, we need to branch out a little bit. You know, we can get out of our comfort zone. We can take on some new challenges, and that's what education and training is for, obviously. You know, we have great partners and great resources out there in the state that can help you guys. We're willing to help you guys branch out, but we want to take on more than just the events and festivals. So we want to be economic focused. We want to encourage broader and community engagement. It's important to get people involved. It's important to get our partners involved. It's important to get the volunteers involved. We want to see tangible and quantifiable outcomes. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes we're so focused on how we're doing it, we're not thinking about why we're doing it. And does it still make sense for us to do it this way? Does it still make sense for us to do it at all? You know, we put a lot of time and energy and resources into something. We need to make sure it's not only paying off for the program, but also for the community in general. You know, the idea is to provide greater organizational flexibility, and, you know, ultimately by, you know, setting these goals up and being able to achieve them and having a work plan and working the plan, that our program will gain more credibility in that process because they see us accomplishing stuff. They see us making an impact. So with that in mind, next steps, where do we go from there? You know, we highly encourage you to have a community town hall meeting or some kind of visioning session. Our new manager's handbook is a great resource for this. We have a whole chapter on how to do strategic planning, how to do SWOT analysis, how to work with the board, the steps that go into that, you know, how to talk about hosting a community visioning session, things that you need to consider and think of. So we're not going to go into that in major detail today because that is a great resource out there for you guys. If you don't have a new manager's handbook and you need one, you can always reach out to us at our general email address, which is Main Street, spelled out all the way, MAINSTREET, at DCA, as in Department of Community Affairs, .ga, as in Georgia, .gov.
Another thing, too, is if you want to lean on your partners a little bit on that, I always brought EMC or Georgia Power in. They would come in and help facilitate. It's great too when you bring them in for larger groups. The last one that we hosted, we had 80 people.
That's awesome.
A lot of different boards, you had a lot of different people, and so when you get that many personalities, you want a professional up there who is really not from the community, so they don't get tied up in the minutia,
politics.
yeah, and the local politics, and so that they can keep everything on track and keep you moving forward.
Absolutely. And, you know, with that visioning session, then we take this information, we process it, we come back with the board, we sit down and we say, okay, what are our next steps? Let's process this feedback, let's hear what people are saying. You know, sometimes we can address these issues, sometimes we can't, sometimes it may be out of our jurisdiction, and that's okay. But once we set these larger goals, we need to identify those smaller goals, those steps that we're going to measure for success, creating that action plan for now and the future, identifying those resources, those partners, who's going to pick up this project and run with it, and that's where the budget and timeline comes into play. And most importantly, and I think this is probably the one thing that people leave off the most, is whose responsibility is it? You know, I hate it when I look at a work plan and it's all the manager, because this is a team sport. This is a team effort. You know, so we want to, you know, I don't need to see every board member committed to everything, but, you know, find something you're passionate about and help contribute in that way. You know, the expectation is that you're involved in part of the process. You don't have to do the whole thing by yourself, but that, you know, you yourself are bringing people to the table, as well as, you know, putting your time and resources in it.
And it may not be simply an individual, it may be a group. Let's say you're working on a beautification project downtown, and the garden club is going to take care of the flower part of it for you. So you just want to put that organization there, or a point person or a contact person, so that the ball doesn't get dropped. Absolutely.
And, you know, having a good work plan that's thoroughly thought out and spelt out who your partners are and who's working on stuff, that also becomes great for succession planning. When you're looking back and saying, okay, look, we wanted to do this. What was the hang up? How did it work? Who did we tap into? You know, what resources were out there for us? You know, this really becomes a great document for you to reference in the future. So a couple of the questions we always get is, what is the board's role versus the manager's role in work plan development? So we're going to briefly go over that. With the board's role, you know, we really invite you guys to think beyond you and your individual business. You are there to represent all the businesses within the district, to make sure that everybody's being considered. Obviously, not everything we do is going to benefit everyone in the same way, but hopefully that there are some things throughout the year that do benefit all businesses.
Well, I will add to that too. The last regional managers meeting that when we were in South Georgia, I think it was Thomasville that was talking about when somebody rolled off, it was a restaurant owner, so they knew that they wanted to get another restaurant owner to fill that board seat. So what they did was they diversified their board based on their business makeup. So they had some lawyers and different. So they set up the board that way. Now they have representation from that entire community.
Yeah. That's great. Well, and also, if you think about it, someone who owns a restaurant is going to be able to think about the challenges that might be facing those restaurant owners.
Exactly.
Or, the challenges that, somebody else may not see because they don't have that type of business. So.
And if you're an attorney, same thing. If you work in, whatever service you work in, you're a retail merchant, you're going to know the issues that face your type of business.
Absolutely. I also always like to look to the board to help establish realistic timelines and budgets. You're a manager, you want to impress people, you want to get stuff done, this is your job, it's important, it's a priority. I feel like managers really do themselves a disservice when they're, just, oh, I got it all, I'm going to knock this out, and then 6 months goes by and you haven't been able to accomplish what you want because, hey, time gets eaten up. So, as a board, it's your responsibility to help that manager establish good, realistic timelines, to, to have that accountability, to look at the budget and see, what's going to work.
Or vice versa. As a manager starts working with the government for a while, sometimes they start to slow down a little bit. And the board members, which are business owners, realize that you have to move at a little bit faster pace. So it's a good give and take a little bit sometimes.
Absolutely. The board, we always rely on them to bring partners to the table. Half of the reason that you're on the board, besides representing your business in the district itself, is also for your connections. It makes it a lot easier for the manager to make an ask if you have an introduction. If you have an in, if you have a friend or a connection in some way, it just makes the ask a little bit easier. And so, we're relying on you as board members to help us make those connections, face to face, as well as help us avoid any pitfalls or landmines that we as a manager may not be aware of. And then last but not least, supporting the manager. This is a family unit. You guys are working together. This is not the board, sets and dictates the work plan and the manager just executes it. This is all hands on deck, everybody involved, and we want to make sure that we're supporting each other in the process. So with the manager, similar stuff, keeping the board focused. It's very easy to have meetings that kind of go awry. We start talking about one thing and we're down a rabbit hole. It's almost like being on the internet on YouTube, and it's like, 2 hours later and you've looked at 50 different videos and you really have no idea where the time's gone. Same thing can happen with board meetings if we're not focused. So it's important for the manager to help really keep the board focused, to make sure that we, are maximizing the time that we have together. As a manager, we also, you are a representative of the city as well as the businesses. You have to wear two hats there, and we look to you to help the board avoid potential landmines. If there's something political going on that they may not know about, if there's something involving partners that they may not know about, let's not get into it and then figure out there's a problem. Let's identify these problems and challenges at the beginning so that way we can, act accordingly. The manager, it's important to identify these smaller measurable steps. It's really easy to think big picture. It's a lot harder to break it down, and to break it down in actual measurable steps that you can check off. And I think sometimes people break it down maybe 1 or 2 steps below that, but not necessarily something, where it's like 3 or 4 steps to achieve something. But I think the smaller the steps, the better. At least, you can see where the hiccups are then potentially. And also with the manager, we want to make sure that this plan of work is going to positively impact all the downtown and the businesses themselves. So we have a different perspective because, we're out talking to the businesses, we're in their shops, in their stores, in their restaurants, day in, day out. Hopefully you have these good relationships that you're building with them. And so sometimes, they may feel more comfortable saying something to you than to another board member. So it's our job to make sure that we're representing the entire district and the needs of everybody within it. So with that being said, I think we're now going to take our next steps and talk about the actual work plan template document itself. And so we're going to highlight that.
Okay, before we get started in that, I will say that this is an example of what Brian from the city of Fayetteville did. He was able to take, instead of using the 4 points, he went and broke it down based on the strategies. And so that worked well, and so we figured we would cover this. We're actually going to include this on the website, so you'll be able to go find this plan. We also defined what each thing means. And so within each organization, you have definitions for various things. So if you look at ours, and we'll start at the top and work down, because you're going to want to work in a hierarchy of different things. So the first one is your vision and mission statement. By now, I hope everyone has one of these. If you don't, you're behind. So you might want to get started on that. But it's basically, the vision is an aspirational description of the communities or organization that you would like to become. This is the dream. This is really big. The mission is a step below that. The mission defines your business, your objectives, and your approach on how you're going to reach this dream. How are you going to become what you want to become, or the community you want to be?
And if you haven't looked at this document in a while, I mean, it's one of the first things Tommy and I usually ask when we go into a community: do you know your vision and mission statement? And more often than not, the answer is no.
And if your vision or mission statement is a paragraph or a short novel, you're going to want to condense that and make it something that's memorable, and so that when people ask you, what is it that you do, you can just spit this out.
Your elevator speech.
Exactly. So we're going to step down from there, and we'll go into the transformation strategy. When we're thinking transformation, you can look right there and think implementation. These are the things that we're going to do to get to the mission and the vision. So working with Joel from Georgia's Downtowns, high impact, long lasting. These are the things you're thinking here. Think these words: high impact, long lasting strategy that will help you accomplish the mission and vision. You're still thinking big picture here, but these are those 3 goals that you're going to want to hit this year or in the next couple of years that are going to make a huge difference, create a high impact in the community, and they're going to be long lasting so that people remember them for years to come, and they make an impact, on and on. So let's see. Now, you're going to go down here and you're going to look at your goals from this point. And what we're going to do is I'm going to break this down section by section and show you an example. So after you broke down the goals, those 3 goals you want to hit to reach each transformation strategy, you're going to look at you're going to want to give us a synopsis, an overview of where you're at, what the hiccup may be, if there is a hiccup, what things you're doing to mitigate that, to navigate around some of this stuff, or just a little synopsis or a paragraph on what you're doing. If you look at the bottom, this is basically an Excel spreadsheet. So you got your work plan overview, and then in Brian's case in Fayetteville, they have strategy 1, strategy 2, strategy 3. He left organization, promotion, design, and economic development, and he will break these down and put them in there too. So if you already have your work plan in place, don't get overwhelmed and think I got to create a whole new document. Just copy it, paste it in where it fits in best. And we're just looking for these certain components so we can make sure that you guys are capturing the information, getting it down, and getting it in a way we can process it on our end to see where we can help out to best help you. So looking at this overview again, the vision statement, the mission statement, and your transformation strategy. You're going to want to make sure you have these in place. We're going to want to see these, because if you're a community, maybe you got a population of 2,000 and your dream is to be Metro Atlanta. Well, that's probably not realistic if you are out in the middle of nowhere and you're not close to any interstates, or nothing's coming. That may be something that's a bridge too far. So we're able to look at that and see. Or vice versa. Maybe you're in the metro, maybe you're inside the perimeter, and you want to market yourself as a rural destination. Well, it's probably not going to happen. Or you want to market yourself as interstate friendly, and right now in Atlanta, that's probably not going to work. Back to the goals here. We list our goal, list the objective, our ambition, or effort. It's an aim or desired result that helps the community get closer to the strategy. These are these 3 things we want you to focus on to get to that strategy. Mark your status here. Let us know if you achieved that this year. If it's year 2, click achieved if you achieved it. If it's in progress and you're going to achieve it next year, hit in progress. If it's stalled, click stalled, put a little mark there, and then tell us why in the comments. That way we know, and if there's something that we can help you with, funding, something like that, we'll reach out to you.
And this is one of my biggest pet peeves right here, not knowing the status of something. Because we look at work plans all the time, and there are times where I'm like, wow, that's a really awesome project. Whatever happened to it? You've got the timeline, you've got the budget, but then there's nothing about if it's been completed or not. There's no idea for us to know, did this happen? Did this get stalled? Did this not happen? Did it change? Did it evolve? And if it did happen, then what was the impact? What came of it?
And we want to be able to help better tell your story.
Absolutely.
So on a state level, we want to know what happened with the project. Did it bring the impact you were wanting to see? Did it bring thousands of people downtown? We want to be able to help you tell that story. Share it on our Facebook, share it on our social media. So make sure you let us know where you are in the project.
And if people, we do get councilmen and elected officials and people in the community that call and reach out to us and ask about the program. So it's nice to be able to say, hey, let me look at their work plan. Yes, did you know that they're working on this in your community and this is where they're at with it, and us to be able to advocate for you.
Right. So I'm going to go from here now, and we're going to focus on Brian's plan. Now, this is some things that he was working through, and he just took one of the transformation strategies they were working on. And again, think in forms of hierarchy. This is where you want to go. So he wanted to use Southern Ground Amphitheater to increase tourism and investment in the city. Great strategy. He had a cause there. He had a purpose. This is what we want to do, and this is why. And it ties into his vision and mission statement. But if you look right here, here's a goal. And remember, the definitions are beside them. The goal is the objective of the community's ambitions or efforts, an aim or desired result. So here's his goal. We're going to expand event offerings and infrastructure at the Southern Ground Amphitheater. So this is a big thing. And a lot of people say, we want to fix our theater. We want to fix our stage. We want to fix our park. But they stop there.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And that's what you call a dream. And dreams, they could stay there for a while. Those dream plans end up on the shelf. They're covered in dust. You can write your name with your finger. You can just kind of scribble it on there. But they're not much more than a show card, something to show off and say, hey, look at this beautiful plan or this thing that we want to do. It's great. But if you keep on breaking it down, you can actually get there. So then you come down, he's got an objective. It's a smaller subset of the goal. These are very measurable tasks that lead you closer to the goal. So what he had was add at least one new concert and one other event at SGA and increase the usable footprint of the general admission lawn area. So this is very specific what he wants to do. To help expand the infrastructure, what they're going to do is increase the usable footprint of the general admission lawn area. So that's something that's not that big of a deal, but it gives you a very good visual on exactly what they're going to do. And if you look here, what he did in this next part was very, very good, I thought, because it includes what category. He just happened to have 3 organizational steps. If he would have kept on going, we would have ended up with some promotion steps, because you got to promote what you're doing and then what you're going to do after. When you're going to have concerts at the venue, you got to promote that. So other points of the category will come. If you look over to the far right over here, you see the 4 points that are to the side. So that tells you what category it falls under. Now, he took the task. Partner with PAS to offer expanded spotlight movie series. Broke it down even further. Now, who's going to be responsible for that? Joyce and Abby are going to work on that. It's going to cost $10,000 plus, and the funding source is part Main Street, part PAS. So it's going to show who's putting into this project, how much they're putting into it, and then Joyce and Abby are going to be working on it. The next thing, see, this is a living, breathing document. They're working on this now, and they're still continuing to work on this work plan. They will eventually put in a timeline that says, hey, we realize after some study it'll take us 3 to 6 months to get this done. They put the timeline in, and by the end of the year, you'll have that measured out. So we're not looking for a completed document all the time. We know there are going to be some blank spaces. There may be a blank in the cost section. You want to fix the amphitheater, but you don't know exactly how much it costs yet, but you're going to do some initial studies. You're going to hire an architect or hire an engineer, and as you get closer, you'll realize what the cost is. Then put it in the document. Now we're able to look at it with you. The next thing they had there was to book a tribute band outside of the regular concert series. So this was them adding another thing to bring more people downtown. Responsible party, Cam and Brian, and he's got his partner, the funding source, how much it's going to cost, falls in the organization category. Now, we look back here, partner with Leslie, contracting to price and bid the amphitheater upgrades. And it looks like it's going to cost $150,000, and it's part of the organization's duties to make this happen. So if you look at it, you go on down, and this is where it gets really important to record this information. You're going to want to, you look at the Dwarf House here as an agency that you're working with. You want to have a primary contact, because if you look back through the documents in later years, you're going to say, well, who are we working with on that? Well, we're working with Dave Johnson. This is just an example. And their level of commitment was $15,000. So it just helps you keep up with who you were working with, what they committed, and how to get a hold of them. I'd also include a phone number there or an email address. Then you come on down and you look at a synopsis of activity here. And I'm going to click on, so the next thing here, so you can look at it, expand it a little bit larger, is everything we talked about. This is strategy 2. It's from the top down. It lists your definitions. You can put your committee chair up there if you're still working in the committees. If you're not, you can take that section out. You can edit this document. Just make sure that you have the necessary components for the work plan. The tasking is in detail here. You can see it a little bit more clear. And what's nice is you also have the status on the far right-hand column or far left-hand column there. Status, you can take and just, you can type in there in progress. You could type in there completed. You could type in there stalled. And then the important part here is after you put your partner involvement, who's doing what, you look at the synopsis of activity. So here's an example. We were able to use Southern Ground Amphitheater to increase tourism and investment in the city by working with our partners from Dwarf House to book a new event. The event brought in 5,000 people to downtown Fayetteville and created an initial economic impact of $70,000. This is great for when you want to give a report back to your city council at the end of the year as to, hey, what did you guys do? Because if you try to answer that on the spot, it's you did so much you can't even remember it all. But if you have a plan, a document that captures everything you're doing, then you'll have everything all captured, and it'll be all in one place. So now we're going to look at the work plan review form.
So this was something that we created as a way so you guys to see what we look for when we're analyzing a work plan document. You know, the things that we want to check off and that we want to see. This is not something that you would fill out. This is something that is internal office use only, but I think it's important to share it with you guys so you can see, you know, what the expectations are.
And this is something we dug into a lot of different communities. We were able to look in their Dropbox. We looked at the communities that were doing the best with what they had. We looked at what was in common between all of them, the commonality between all of them. And these are the things that are in a really good work plan. It was the same when I was there. Sure, it was the same when Jessica was there. When you have these things in place, you see communities actually use their work plan for a tool.
Absolutely. So what we'll do is, you know, as this will be a part of our annual assessment, we need to, you know, we'll expect to see you guys using this work plan template that Tommy has just highlighted through these past few slides. We'll, you know, identify the community and the manager. We'll go in here and indicate, you know, who has done, oops, let me go back, who has done what, you know, so we hope to see that you have met all these, you know, boxes right here, been able to check everything off. And then there's an opportunity for us to either ask questions or provide feedback regarding the information that you've provided us. And that's, you know, an opportunity for us to have a dialogue. And then that will be part of the annual assessment itself. Before we conclude, I do want to show everybody where they can find this information on the website, but of course we need to remember that goals that aren't written down are just wishes, and that's why, you know, we're not going to be able to achieve anything just by wishing our way there. We have to work hard and create a plan, and so that's, you know, what we've been talking about today. But I want to take an opportunity to show you on the website where you can go to find this information. So our website is GeorgiaMainStreet.com. Oops. You don't want to go to the admin side. There we go. So when you're on our website, the place you're going to go is here. It says Main Street Statewide. You're going to click on that button. And then you'll see here, Georgia Standards for Accreditation. When you click Read More, it's going to show you these are our actual standards that you can download that the assessment will be based on. And then here's our blank forms and documents and an example of how to set up your Dropbox folder. We will be adding here a link to this webinar recorded on our YouTube channel. And when you go into these blank forms and documents, you will be able to see that information that we're talking about, the ODD work plan template here. Other things that we're including this year, the 2017 training log, a blank board roster document so that you can give us your board roster information, a list of partners, and so we've got some other documents in here, work plan review form, that's the document that we were talking about for internal use only, a way of tracking your volunteer hours, sources and uses for events. These are just some extra documents that we've created that we hope you will find useful, and we also reference in our new manager's handbook. And it's something that I wish I had when I was a manager. And a lot of times when we're creating stuff here, we're thinking, oh, what were we doing? How are we using it? How did we make it work? We're trying to think of ways to help you guys work smarter, not harder. So that's where this information will live, and it'll always be there. So thank you all for joining us today, and we appreciate your time. And if you need anything, you can always find us here on our website is our contact information. You can reach out to all of us individually, or you can send us an email, and that will come to everybody on the staff if you're not really sure where to start. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.